Hi, Cindy Fisher here, publisher of the Black Belt News Network, and I am here with Paul DeMarco. He is a political analyst for the state of Alabama. It covers a lot of things in the state. Also has a background in being in the legislature. So we are so happy to have you here, Paul.
Glad to be with you.
Today's topic, we are going to talk about 2023 year in review. And this is great. So you guys actually will see columns from Paul in the Selma Sun's print edition and also on our online selmasun.com and Black Belt News Network. So we run his columns throughout the year. And we had one recently, this last week's edition, on a wrap up of 2023, which is so interesting for us because here in the Black Belt we had a lot of topics that came up this year that were pretty impactful. So let's get starting unpacking all of the discussions that happened in the legislature in 2023, and let's start in kind of an obvious spot for the Black Belt, and that is the ruling by the Supreme Court to reapportion and redraw the lines for the congressional districts. That really had an impact on, Terry Sewell's seat and who's going to fight for this seat as we come up into an election year. So tell us your thoughts on what happened last year with the redrawing.
Yeah, pretty significant ruling, not only for Alabama, but for the nation. And so we'll be watching it. It's not over with yet. The Attorney General has appealed the lower court ruling. And so we'll see ultimately what the Supreme Court does with the redistricting. But for now, we have new districts in the state. And one of those districts is a new district, what they call an opportunity district, that the court allowed to move forward with, that starts down into Mobile and goes all the way over to Phoenix City and includes portions of the Black Belt, as you discussed. So that's a new district, and there's no incumbent in that district. And so I think there are like 21 different candidates in that race, both in the Democratic and the Republican primary. That will be on March the 5th, the party primaries. I can guarantee you there will be runoffs both in the Democrat Party and Republican Party. That'll be a few weeks later. But, for the whole enchilada, that'll be next fall in November of 2024 when that race will be decided. And will the Republicans keep their 6-seat majority in Alabama, or will the Democrats take a seat? Obviously, for Terry Sewell's seat, her seat ended up keeping the majority, including Selma. And so she's in a pretty good position based on the way those maps were drawn.
Well, and Terry is actually a Selma native. So when she comes home to Dallas County, also with a lot of ties to Perry County, people are always great, love to see her here because they think that it helps to have someone that is a native rooting for them in Congress.
Well, there was a lot of question about whether Selma would stay as part of Terry Sewell's seat. It did. There are Republican challengers who I know are challenging and are saying, hey, look at with a presidential election year, anything can happen. Yes. But that's what's going on with that seat. And then also the first seat, District 1, there are 2 Republican incumbents will be challenging each other, which is Congressman Jerry Carl from Mobile and then Barry Moore from the Wiregrass. So that's a race we'll be watching as well. So the Supreme Court ruling really upended what our congressional seats look like. So we'll be watching all 3 of those seats, but particularly that new seat that stretches all the way from the Mobile to the Black Belt to the Wiregrass over to the Georgia border.
And really the idea being that it's more minority representation, which I love the idea of that, especially here in the Black Belt. We definitely want to see more equality and voting rights. That's been a big issue here for 60, 70 more years.
So that the Supreme Court allowed what they call an opportunity district, which the plaintiffs argued would give minorities an opportunity to elect a representative. So again, I think it's going to be a very competitive seat with Republicans and Democrats, particularly being a presidential election year. There will be thousands, if not millions of dollars flowing into this state for those seats. Republicans hold the United States House of Representatives by 4 seats. So there will be a lot of money pouring in, a lot of people watching this race here in Alabama, because that could decide the difference in the majority in Congress.
That's going to be interesting. And maybe we'll talk a little more about that and look forward to 2024 interview that we talked about doing. Let's talk about crime for a minute, because that has been an issue in the Black Belt, and there were some bills that were passed in the last session in 2023 that could help with some of the curbing. So tell us about that.
Yeah, there were about 4 or 5 significant bills that passed this past session that we're watching to see again. Do they have an effect on crime, which we've seen violent crime spike in the state? One of them was penalties for fentanyl trafficking, increasing the penalties for fentanyl trafficking. And we've seen that crisis not only here in Alabama but across the country. So with that bill signed, hopefully we'll see that affect those who want to traffic fentanyl in our state, because they've really stiffened the penalties. The next bill was regarding gang violence. You saw the mass shooting in Dadeville last year, where 32 were injured and 4 were killed at that teenage birthday party over in Dadeville, Alabama, over in the eastern portion of the state. And so the legislature passed a criminal enterprise bill, which basically involves, if you commit some violent act in the course of, basically gang activity, that those penalties can be stiffened. Also, if you can be charged as an adult. So that bill was signed into law by the governor. We saw other legislation regarding the good time laws in Alabama. There was an individual that was released significantly earlier than his sentence, ended up murdering a deputy, if you recall, up in Bibb County. And so Alabama went back and looked at the good time laws and basically said, you don't get good time law if you've been sentenced to some, like a murder or killing. So that. And then finally, the legislature passed retail theft bill, basically to take care of a lot of these shoplifting crimes that have not been any stiff penalties on. And you've seen a lot of shoplifting rings go in to stores. And so hopefully we'll see more prosecutions in that. So those were some significant bills in the criminal justice arena that we saw pass this past session.
Another big one for the Black Belt that we have been watching is the grocery tax reduction. Tell us about how that's going to impact us.
And let me tell you, that was a long time coming. That has been decades in the coming. As you're aware, in Alabama, we have a 4-cent tax on groceries. So this past year, the law passed, and you've already seen, if you look at your receipt at the grocery store, it was reduced by 1 cent. So now, if it were the 2nd cent would be removed, depending on what the education budget, if it is to a certain point. They don't want to, because the sales tax, those monies go into the education budget. And so they wanted to make sure, can we pass this without affecting money going to public education? So if it reaches a certain level, then that 2nd cent will also be removed. I am optimistic that we'll see those last 2 cents go away eventually. It may not happen in the next couple of years. A lot of it's going to be dependent on the budgets. We've had some historic budgets passed the past couple of years, but that's about to come to an end, especially with some of the federal COVID dollars that are going to expire at the end of this year. So I do think we'll ultimately get to that 2 cents, take it off. And so the grocery tax will be 2 cents as opposed to 4 cents. Ultimately, we'll see, can the state get rid of those last 2 cents?
And the big part about this is how it affects lower income households. It's kind of considered an unfair tax because it really hits the poor so heavily.
So I'm optimistic that eventually Alabama is one of the few states that has a grocery tax. I think there's only about 3 or 4 left. So hopefully we'll see that tax ultimately removed in the next 4 or 5 years.
So let's talk about this budget, large budgets that you mentioned. How does that play in for us, and what efforts are being made to help? I know education came up as an issue with these large budgets.
Yeah, we've had historic education budgets the past couple of years, and really been able to fund some programs that the governor's made a priority, like pre-K and reading and issues like that, particularly since the pandemic. So where we've seen some real scholastic achievement issues,
Yes,
they have put the money in. So now the question is, it's anticipated that tax revenues will start slowing. Some of these federal COVID dollars that were there to help supplement some of the issues like infrastructure and broadband to rural areas is going to go away. So that's going to be the real question: is how does how do state leaders, how do lawmakers continue to try to attack these scholastic achievement, these education scores, when some of the budgets may end up getting cut in the next couple of years?
Wow, these are some big topics, and I'm so glad we had a chance to cover some of these. This is kind of the highlights of what happened in 2023. Check in with us later as we talk about what's coming in 2024. The session starts in a couple of weeks, so still have a couple weeks to think about it and talk about it and get prepared for what might come in 2024. Thank you so much, Paul, for joining us today.
I'll be glad to get back with you as we get ready for the new year in 2024.
That's right. And we will talk to you next time.
Thank you.